Franz Clemens Honoratus. Hermann Brentano was an influential German philosopher, psychologist, and priest whose work strongly influenced not only students Sigmund Freud, Kazimierz Twardowski, Alexius Meinong, Karl Stumpf, Anton Marty, Christian von Ehrenfels, and Tomáš Masaryk, but many others whose work would follow and make use of his original ideas and concepts. Life. Brentano was born at Marienburg am Rhein, near Boppard. He was the nephew of Clemens Brentano and Bettina von Arnim. He studied philosophy at the universities of Munich, Würzburg, Berlin and Munster. He had a special interest in Aristotle and scholastic philosophy. He wrote his dissertation in 1862 at Tübingen under the title Von der Mannigfaltigen des Sünden nach Aristoteles. His thesis advisor was Franz Jacob Clemens. Subsequently he began to study theology and entered the seminary in Munich and then Würzburg. He was ordained a Catholic priest on August 6, 1864. In 1865-66 he wrote and defended his habilitation thesis, Die Psychologie des Aristoteles, insbesondere die Lehre vom Nous Poetikos, and began to lecture at the University of Würzburg. His students in this period included, among others, Karl Stumpf and Anton Marty. Between 1870 and 1873, Brentano was heavily involved in the debate on papal infallibility. A strong opponent of such dogma, he eventually gave up his priesthood and his tenure in 1873 and in 1879 left the church altogether. He remained, however, deeply religious and dealt with the topic of the existence of God in lectures given at the universities of Würzburg and Vienna. In 1874 Brentano published his major work, Psychology from an Empirical Standpoint. From 1874 to 1895 he taught at the University of Vienna. Among his students were Edmund Husserl, Alexius Meinong, Christian von Ehrenfels, Rudolf Steiner, Tomáš Masaryk, Sigmund Freud, Kazimierz Twardowski and many others. While he began his career as a full ordinary professor, he was forced to give up both his Austrian citizenship and his professorship in 1880 in order to marry, but he was permitted to stay at the university only as a private dozen. After his retirement in 1895, he moved to Florence in Italy, transferring to Zurich at the outbreak of the First World War, where he died in 1917. Work. Intentionality. Brentano is best known for his reintroduction of the concept of intentionality, a concept derived from scholastic philosophy, to contemporary philosophy in his lectures and in his work Psychologie vom empirischen Standpunkt, while often simplistically summarized as aboutness, or the relationship between mental acts and the external world. Brentano defined it as the main characteristic of mental phenomena, by which they could be distinguished from physical phenomena. Every mental phenomenon, every psychological act has content, is directed at an object. Every belief, desire, etc., has an object that they are about, the believed, the desired. Brentano used the expression intentional in existence to indicate the status of the objects of thought in the mind. The property of being intentional, of having an intentional object, was the key feature to distinguish psychological phenomena and physical phenomena, because, as Brentano defined it, physical phenomena lacked the ability to generate original intentionality, and could only facilitate an intentional relationship in a second-hand manner, which he labeled derived intentionality. Brentano introduced a distinction between genetic psychology and descriptive psychology. In his terminology, genetic psychology is the study of psychological phenomena from a third-person point of view, which involves the use of empirical experiments. The aim of descriptive psychology, on the other hand, is to describe consciousness from a first-person point of view. The latter approach was further developed by Husserl and the phenomenological tradition. theory of perception. He is also well known for claiming that Wahrnehmung ist Falschnehmung, that is to say, perception is erroneous. In fact, he maintained that external sensory perception could not tell us anything about the de facto existence of the perceived world, which could simply be illusion. However, we can be absolutely sure of our internal perception. When I hear a tone, I cannot be completely sure that there is a tone in the real world, but I am absolutely certain that I do hear. This awareness of the fact that I hear is called internal perception. External perception, sensory perception, can only yield hypotheses about the perceived world, but not truth. Hence he and many of his pupils thought that the natural sciences could only yield hypotheses and never universal, absolute truths as in pure logic and mathematics. However, in a reprinting of his Psychologie vom empirischen Standpunkte, he recanted this previous view. He attempted to do so without reworking the previous arguments within that work, but it has been said that he was wholly unsuccessful. The new view states that when we hear a sound, we hear something from the external world. There are no physical phenomena of internal perception. Theory of judgment. Brentano has a theory of judgment which is different from what is currently the predominant view. At the center of Brentano's theory of judgment lies the idea that a judgment depends on having a presentation, but this presentation does not have to be predicated. Even stronger, Brentano thought that predication is not even necessary for judgment, because there are judgments without a predicational content. Another fundamental aspect of his theory is that judgments are always existential. This so-called existential claim implies that when someone is judging that S is P, she is judging that some S that is P exists. In Brentano's own symbols, her judgment is always of the form plus A or A, combined with the third fundamental claim of Brentano, the idea that all judgments are either positive or negative. We have a complete picture of Brentano's theory of judgment. So, imagine that you doubt whether midgets exist. At that point you have a presentation of midgets in your mind. When you judge that midgets do not exist, then you are judging that the presentation you have does not present something that exists. You do not have to utter that in words or otherwise predicate that judgment. The whole judgment takes place in the denial of the existence of the presentation you have. The problem of Brentano's theory of judgment is not the idea that all judgments are existential judgments. The real problem is that Brentano made no distinction between object and presentation. A presentation exists as an object in your mind, so you cannot really judge that A does not exist, because if you'd so you also judge that the presentation is not there. Twardowski acknowledged this problem and solved it by denying that the object is equal to the presentation. This is actually only a change within Brentano's theory of perception, but has a welcome consequence from the theory of judgment, viz., that you can have a presentation but at the same time judge that the object does not exist. Legacy. Brentano's focus on conscious intentionality was inherited by Carl Stumpf's Berlin School of Experimental Psychology, Anton Marty's Prague School of Linguistics, Alexius Meinong's Graz School of Experimental Psychology, Kazimierz Twardowski's LWOW School of Philosophy, and Husserlian Phenomenology. Bibliography. Major works by Brentano in German on the several senses of being in Aristotle. The Psychology of Aristotle. Psychology from an Empirical Standpoint. Psychologie vom empirischen Standpunkt. Ed. Oskar Kraus. 2 vols. Leipzig. Minor. ISBN 3-7873-00147. Was für ein Philosoph manchmal Epoche macht. The Origin of Our Knowledge of Right and Wrong. Aristotle and His World View. The Classification of Mental Phenomena. The True and the Evident, Philosophical Investigations on Space-Time and Phenomena. Descriptive Psychology. Collected Works Edition Samtliche veröffentlichte Schriften in den Banden. Frankfurt, Ontos Verlag. 1. Psychologie vom empirischen Standpunkt von der Klassifikation der psychischen Phänomene 2. Untersuchung an zur Sinnespsychologie. 3. Schriften zur Ethik und Ästhetik 4. Von der mannigfachen Bedeutung des Sinns nach Aristoteles.